Hey, good morning. Welcome back. Doug Pagitt Radio, Hour 2. This is our Sunday morning conversation that moves all the way to the afternoon, from AM to PM.
That's right.
Starts early and runs late. We're like the post office around here. This is our weekly religious radio. That's not quite right. Your Sunday indulgence. As we like to say around here. Well, we run this as a live radio program. Now, some people wonder about that. I'll meet people and I'll say that, what do you do in your life? And I tell them about many of the things that I do. And, I'm talking about what they do. And I bring up this radio show and they say, oh, is it a live show? And what they mean by live show, almost exclusively, people say, oh, are there callers? Can people call in? Which is great. We love having callers. Call us right now. We'd love to chat with you. In fact, I am berated regularly by people who listen to this radio program that I don't often enough give the radio call-in number, and that's why they don't call.
It's complicated.
But you can take calls at 952-946-6205. We'd love to have you call in, love to have you chat on the telephone here with us, or we'd love to have you be on the internet on the live studio web feed.
Yeah.
And you can be chatting with the guest host and the sidekick and the host and one another. You can be in a little chat room typing all that you want. But that's not what makes that's not what makes this live radio.
Okay.
It's not just that people can call in. There's another quality that makes this live radio. And we made a decision, we meaning me, a long time ago, that I want to do this radio program live, meaning that when you speak, it's heard by people with the 7-second delay that the FCC requires, right? Yeah. That's it. You hear it, and you hear it right now. There's no editing going on. There's no production happening. There's no pre-production before you hear it. It's not being all compressed, because I thought that the kind of radio that you get when it's done actually live is more vital, is more charismatic, is more lively, and is more honest than the kind of radio that you get that's produced. Well, I'm a big radio fan. I listen to the radio a lot. And I listen in my car, I listen on my computer, I listen to lots of different kinds of radio. And one of the radio stations I like to listen to is NPR, National Public Radio.
Sure.
They're part of the public utility of the Congress, and they're top quality programming. And very interesting people. In fact, we've had a number of NPR guests here on this radio program where we're sort of, it's part of the industry. We're kind of all in it together, and I like listening to their programming. Well, last week I was listening to a program called On the Media, and they replayed a show a segment from 2004 that I want to play now, where the fella talks about working for NPR and putting together for the first time the real behind the scenes of what happens at NPR. That NPR sounds live, but they're doing massive amounts of work to make it sound better, to put it together in a way that sounds great. So instead of having, in this part of our radio program, in this segment, one of our interviews, we're going to interview sort of by playing his 7-minute segment. Then we're going to talk about how it is that influences not only how we want to think about radio programming here, but more importantly, why thinking about radio programming in this way, I think, has something to do with how we should live out faith in our lives. As a Christian person, I think we shouldn't put together a presentation of Christianity for churches or for individuals that's all pre-packaged, pre-programmed, all the ums and ahs taken out of it, all the misstatements blended over, all the funny little endings taken out so that everything sounds just the way it's supposed to sound. That might give you good, pure radio entertainment, but it's not very honest in some ways, and they're going to hear that in the interview. And then I think that has to do with how we live our lives, that if we spend so much time, for those of us who are in the religious industry, putting together a pre-packaged program for people, it creates the wrong perceptions in their heads about how they're supposed to live their lives. So, all right, now we have 7 minutes left in this segment, so I think we have about a 7-minute bit. I'll talk over it a little bit, but here it is, and I'll make some comments as I go, so you'll hear his voice and you'll hear my voice. So go ahead, Glenn, roll that.
NPR.
Before I started working at On the Media, I was an avid NPR News listener. To me, like many devotees, an important aspect of the network's appeal is how smooth, well-crafted, and polished it sounds.
Amen, I get that.
Everyone seems
like he
so
sounds
eloquent.
right now.
Interviewers ready with a clearly posed, on-point question. Interviewees offering an articulate answer. Rarely an or you know uttered. Correspondents in the field, even when reporting from the middle of the rainforest, are equally cogent and coherent, and hosts move naturally, effortlessly, and spontaneously between stories.
Glenn, can you pause it right
soothing
there?
and reliable sound has made the NPR...
And that's what makes the pressure on running a radio show so high, is that people think you have to be able to do it just like that. So you listen to that stuff all the time, and you think they're doing it live, and you're like, man, those people are just good.
Yeah.
Like, they always have a great question. They're always right there. The answers they get are so coherent. You know, we do these 30-minute interviews sometimes, and it gets a little rambly. And, you know, sometimes I pose a funny question, or I pose it in a way that
throws
doesn't
them
quite
off.
work, and it throws them off. You don't get any of that. Well, you hear NPR, and you're like, man, they are just hardcore professionals. Well, with a lot of editing, as it turns out. Okay, so go back to the tape.
Product distinctive from other radio and news media.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Melissa Block.
And I'm Michelle Norris. Next, the rule of law in Russia.
Tips for senators on how to survive.
Now that I am on the other side of the speaker, it has been fascinating to discover the importance of behind-the-scenes technical packaging.
Which we don't do any of on this
that
program,
effect.
by the way, folks.
Of course,
we
I want to make it clear that I have found the NPR News on-air staff, present company excluded, is indeed smooth and eloquent, and normally ask the right question. But they, and now me, aren't as perfect as it once seemed. New York Times media reporter David Carr.
Everybody always sounds erudite and witty on NPR, and I've always wondered why, and I think there probably is some darkroom magic going on there.
My exposure to the darkroom began when I edited my first story. I sat at the digital editing console with a producer, listening to an interview with a source I had recorded earlier. With just strokes of the keyboard, he cleaned up and tightened the sound bites I was going to use, taking out sentences, words, and even some of the pauses, making what are called internal edits. Then the various thoughts were woven together technically in a way that would be totally hidden to the listener. In fact, the public is far less aware of editing on radio than on television or in print.
Yeah, you
For
don't even hear
example,
it.
to eliminate words, a TV producer has to use more visible means, such as a cutaway shot or jump cut. Newspaper reporters by form must put a break between non-consecutive quotations, among other constraints. David Carr says that at the Times,
People have to speak in complete sentences or you don't use it.
NPR interview subjects almost never
not in
complain
radio.
about the slicing and dicing, in large part because the edits make them sound more articulate without changing the meaning. In fact, what David Carr actually said on tape was,
People have to speak in complete sentences or you don't use it.
while many public radio
See that he
programs,
cleans all that
particularly
up.
call-in shows are live, I was surprised to find out that newsmaker interviews for the daily NPR national news shows, Morning Edition and All Things Considered, are often not. Usually they are pre-taped and quickly edited down. Likewise, I was stunned when I learned that the main Fresh Air interview is actually condensed from a longer Q&A. And at times, the Car Talk guys will edit in some extra laughs kept on file.
How about that? They just overlay those obnoxious laughs.
Oh, my word.
Here at On the Media, we do even more editing because as a weekly show, we have more time.
But not us on
It
Dyke
helps
Badger
make
Radio.
us sound far
We got
more
no time at all.
articulate than we actually are.
We sound
For
less articulate than we
example,
are.
Here's Bob's original question in a recent interview taping with National Journal's Bill
This is a great
Powers.
one. Listen
Now,
to
your
this.
column this week says that there's actually a disadvantage to being a front runner because immediately the media want to take you down. That is a very serious charge, really, against the media. How true is it? Are the motives really so? Let's see. Are the motives really so sinister? That's not quite the right word. Are they really so?
Let's say, are they really so vicious?
Mindlessly bloodthirsty. I mean, what you're describing is a kind of bloodlust. Are the media really bloodthirsty?
So he puts together this whole way he's
going
gonna ask this
more
question.
Responsible going on.
Here's how it sounded after the editing.
Now, your column this week says there's actually a disadvantage to being a front runner because immediately the media want to take you down. I mean, what you're describing is a kind of bloodlust. Are the media really bloodthirsty? Isn't there something a little bit more responsible going on?
Nothing is so identified with NPR News
Unbelievable.
as its signature field pieces, and nothing is more of a cut-and-paste production collage. My first such story was a media workout day held for reporters by the National Football League's New York Jets at their practice facility.
I was thinking about it. I did
Before
this
I left, the
show
producer
from Haiti.
suggested I
Didn't do
record
any of
ambient
this.
sound during the drills that could be mixed
Just
later
recorded
into
it
the piece
live.
underneath
These
my
dirty
narration.
dogs.
That confused me. As a listener, I had thought that the narration in field pieces was recorded by the reporter at the location. Oh no! I guess I should have realized reporters wouldn't always be able to deliver their clear, concise, well-organized prose while also reporting the story. Okay, now that the curtain has been pulled back a bit, the natural question is, so what? Is there any problem that this behind-the-scenes manufacturing process is largely unknown, maybe until now, to the average NPR listener?
I think there's no question that most people listening to NPR programs are unaware of the artifice that's there.
NPR veteran field reporter Alex Chadwick is now the host of the program Day to Day.
Well, why do they try to make it sound that way if it's not that way? It's not real. Well, because the world of presentation and the media really isn't real in that sense. It is real, but it's a kind of a heightened reality. It's a better reality. It's a cleaner and more articulate reality.
By making everyone sound better and increasing the amount of content in the broadcasts, it would seem to be a win-win-win for the network, its sources, and most importantly, its listeners. Yet is there a small sin of omission? NPR may not be actively misleading listeners, but we all know that they don't know how we create the cleaner and more articulate reality.
Okay, so that's I cut out a bit of his bit there. He's got a little bit longer, so I did cut some of that out because I was using it for my own purpose. Oh, sure. But I think that's such an interesting thing that they're doing, saying we do something with this audio that makes it sound better. And as the listener, I'm glad for that, right? I think that's great. The problem is when we live our lives thinking that our lives are supposed to be like that and you don't have the privilege of that kind of editing, it creates a wrong expectation. So Glenn, can we borrow a minute from the next segment? So I want to play for you. I did an interview with a theologian named Stanley Hauerwas. And I did it in the field, one of these in-field interviews, right? So I did it in his office at Duke University in North Carolina. And in the middle of the interview, we're interrupted by a knock on the door that you'll hear in the interview. He yells to the guy at the door, which I think is hilarious. He yells at him and then says to me, hey, you'll edit that out, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I could edit that out. And then I'm bumbling on saying, but I kind of like it that people hear that we're doing a real interview like this because I think it sounds more authentic and more honest. Now, what's funny is he's in a part of the discussion where he's trying to say that as a theologian, he wants to be more honest than most theologians, more truthful. And then in this part, he's like, but you can edit that out, right? You can clean all that up. So it kind of pushes. Okay, so Glenn, go ahead and play that play that Hauerwas bit.
To discover
that's him talking
a
here.
Language that is straightforward and without deception. And that's not easy. So I try very hard to tell the truth.
This guy knocking on his door trying to come in.
Donald?
Just the custodian? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the name of the book, Hannah's Child, where does that come from?
Donald, come back later. Come in. I'm sorry, do you edit it?
No, yeah, I'll edit it. It'll be fine. For people like that.
Sorry about that. Like that's all right. Hey, Dan, come on in.
Yeah, okay, so I play that entire thing because I think for a theologian to be saying what I want to do is be a little bit more honest and more authentic and tell the truth. I'm like, well, then let's not edit it. Yeah. Let's let people hear the awkward parts and they can make their way through this, because if we create too professional of a view and a vibe, it changes things. So we're going to come back and talk about how that has to do with our Christianity in the same way. Here after the break, live with no edifice in front of us, no artifice around us. No edifice in front of us, no artifice around us. See, I would have cut that out because that sounded a little weird.
Glenn, hey, on that. Got an edifice complex.
Yeah, got an edifice complex and the artifice. Hey, we'll be back here after the break. We'll talk about what this has to do with the rest of our lives here in a second.
If you're looking for a beautifully designed, eco-friendly